Welcome to another edition of the McEnulty Method, where we try to help young adults live a better financial life. I'm joined tonight by financial expert Frank McEnulty. Frank, how you doing?
Great, Colin. Good to be here.
I'm glad to have you here because I don't think I could get through this alone. Tonight, we're talking about taxes, but also something a little more fun: side hustles, passive income, negotiating job offers. So it's a full plate for tonight. But Frank, let's dive right in with some of the basics of taxes. Well, everybody thinks they know what they are, but what are taxes and what types of taxes, when you're first coming out of college as a young adult, should you be expecting to pay?
Well, I mean, most people have a job along the way uh, while they're in college these days, and if it's a regular job, not a below the table job where you're getting paid cash, you're paying taxes. And so there's four taxes that everybody gets hit with. There's Social Security, which is 6.4% of your pay up to right now it's around 160 or $170,000 a year. Then there's Medicare, which is, I guess, Social Security 6.2. Medicare is 1.45% of your pay forever. You make $1 billion, it's 1.45% of $1 billion, I think. It actually goes up if you make enough money. And then there's obviously federal income tax, which is your contribution to keeping America running. It's really that simple. We got roads, we got planes, we got, you know, FAA, the military, you name it. That's where the money's going. And then we have state taxes, which quite honestly is your payment for living in the state you live in. And yeah, you can get mad about it. You can claim it's horrible, but they have to pay for stuff somehow. That's what taxes are.
That doesn't sound very fun, but something that I think would be good for young adults to know, and something I know you have some experience with, the difference between being an employee, being a contractor, and what to prepare for. Let's say you are a contractor. I think being an employee is usually pretty straightforward. You get your W-2 at the end of the year, and you just go. Now the computers make it so easy. But if you're going to be a contractor, how does that change your approach to taxes?
Well, if you're a contractor, now you have to still pay the same amount of taxes, but no one's deducting them for you and paying them along the way. So you're still paying your federal income tax, you're still paying your state income tax, and you're paying both the employer side and the employee side of Social Security and Medicare. So you're now paying twice as much of those taxes. So 7.65% is the half the tax for Social Security and Medicare. So now you're paying 15.3% in Social Security and Medicare. And that just gets paid with your other taxes. So that's the biggest difference tax wise. Yes, you do get to deduct half of that payment from your income, but it still works out a little, I think, a little worse for you. But the other thing that happens when you're a contractor is you can now deduct any expenses you may have that pertain to your contracting job. So you use those expenses to lessen your income.
That actually segues very nicely, whether you're a contractor or not, because Frank, I was going to ask you about deductions, and if you could talk a little bit about what deductions are so people are a little more clear on it. And then whether you're a contractor, employee, just in general, common deductions that you know of that might apply to students or young adults.
Well, quite honestly, until a few years ago, this was a much more relevant topic for most
Right.
people.
They switched it up.
Well, they raised the standard deduction for
Mm-hmm.
everybody, which standard deduction, I'm blanking all of a sudden, for a person is $15,000, $16,000 possibly, but it's basically,
In the ballpark. Yeah.
so you make $60,000 and you get a standard deduction of 15,000. So 60 minus 15. So now you're only paying income tax on the 45,000. So it's the government's way of saying, okay, we'll let you keep most of the first amounts of money you make. You still pay Social Security and Medicare on those things, but we're not going to tax you too much on the first amount. And so, like, even I have a hard time having itemized deductions anymore because the standard deduction for a married couple is just so high. I have a very, very small mortgage payment or interest payment on my mortgage to deduct. Um, Donations, I feel I give out a reasonable amount each year, but it's nothing to take me up to the past the standard deduction. So it's deductions have become less of an issue for most people now. And which brings me to the point, people always say, business owners, well, they'll just deduct it. Like they get the money back for free. But here's the idea. If you get a deduction and you're in the 30% tax bracket, well, you're only getting 30% of that money back because you're getting back what you save in taxes from the deduction. And I know that we just got a little wonky there, but so deductions are not, if you're a contractor though, you want to keep track of all your deductions. You want to keep track of your mileage. You want to keep track of everything because that comes right off your top income.
Right.
And so that deductions are far more important these days to people that actually work for themselves, have their own business, than they are for regular taxpayers.
Yeah. Well, speaking of people who work for themselves, Frank, there's a lot of interest to talk about side hustles and creating passive income. That's seems to be the trend for a lot of young adults. So, can you talk a little bit about, you've told some stories in the past about people who've gone out of their way to generate more income, but maybe why generating passive income is so important? And then, how does it relate to some of the things we've been talking about as far as saving, budgeting, all of that?
Well, there's passive income and active income. Passive income is really comes from when once you start saving money, you have a bank account, you do have stocks that pay dividends. That's passive income. You're not really doing anything. It just gives you money. It's the greatest thing. You know, there's a thing in the internet world called Swiss money, sales while I'm still sleeping. So they call it. It just happens. You just get money. You're not doing anything. In many ways, that's later on in people's lives. Once they've put their money away and it's
Right.
grown to a couple $1,000,000, then you can just earn 5% on your couple $1,000,000 a year, and you're getting $100,000 a year in passive income. That's a great thing. But the side hustle thing is, if you really want something, find something to do besides your regular job to get the money for it quicker. Don't dig yourself a hole. Earn it. You'll actually appreciate it more. I've Talia's going to get me one of these days for using her as the example of this, but neighbor of ours, she was in her 20s. She wanted to buy a condo, and she had a decent job with a big company, but she wanted to buy a condo and she wanted it quicker rather than later. And so she started taking evening jobs, weekend jobs, and just everything she made on those jobs, she just saved and put it away. And pretty darn quick, in a couple of years, she would have the down payment to buy a condo and move into it. And I've always been very impressed with that. She saw what she wanted, she realized what she wanted, and she went and did it. She didn't sit there and whine and say, "Oh, it's too expensive, it's too this." No, she just worked.
The- Are there any side hustles out there that you would recommend for young adults these days? Or advice you would give for somebody who wants to find a side hustle?
If you've got the right car, if you've got a hybrid Prius or something, which will run forever, and they're really cheap to run, and you like to meet new people, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Uber or Lyft doing that. They don't make as much money as they used to. Um, but hopefully you get good tips, and that's better money. You can do it sort of when you want, which is good. Um, and there's, these the old standby, also, DoorDash, delivering food, and just, find what's something you really like to do and just get a part-time job doing it.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to hire people that'll actually show up and do things. I don't think it's a problem finding a job. Maybe finding that perfect job but you're not looking for a perfect job. You're looking for a job that's just going to make you money. And I think those jobs are out there.
Yeah. No, that was great. Obviously, it's always good to find any opportunity to make extra money because, as we talked last time about the power of saving and time, and the more money you can put away, the better off you'll be. Don't want to forget about, though, for most people, their big income comes from that 9 to 5. So I want to touch a little bit on negotiating job offers, right? So I get out of college, I get that first real 9 to 5 professional job, and I get presented with the job offer, Frank. What should maybe my goals be as far as negotiating a job offer, and what elements are even negotiable?
Well, there's it's a tough one. It depends on the job. And you have to know what other people are getting paid for the same type of work in your area. I had an employer call me up once. I'd sent somebody there for them to hire. This person was a perfect fit for what they needed, hard worker and everything else. And the employer calls me up at like 8:30 at night and goes, "What what is wrong with this person?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, they said that I offered them a salary, and they came back and they say they want $85,000 a year." And this was a few years ago. I said, "I'll call you back." So I called up the student. I said, "What the hell's wrong with you? Where did this $85,000 number come from?" She goes, "Well, I looked up the nationwide salary range, and it went from 50 to $85,000." I was like, "Okay, yeah, in New York City, Boston, it's probably $85,000."
And that's assuming it's usually 50 to 85, so she's already on the high end of the range.
Right. And so I said, "You're not in New York City.
Yeah.
Southern California, smaller company, nice place to work. You're way overreaching." And quite honestly, the only reason she got hired was because they were able to call me and I was able to get this situation in hand. Because otherwise they would have just said, "Well, no, you're unrealistic. We're not gonna we'll move on. We'll find somebody who's more realistic." So yeah, what I've seen students able to do is get a couple $3,000 a lot of times out of people. They offer them 60,000. You go, "Well, I'd really like 63, and here's why," and have some reasons. Um, really what you're looking for out of your first couple jobs is how much training are they going to give you? How much stuff can you get out of the employer that you can take with you if you ever leave?
Yeah.
And so, I know we've talked about this before. What's negotiable beyond salary? Well, that to me is what's negotiable beyond salary. Sick times, standard.
Yeah.
Vacation time, standard.
401k match is
Standard.
standard.
That's all standard.
Yeah.
So it could be, okay, you'll send me to this much training a year, or you'll, pay for this much training. That would that would actually probably be better than trying to argue with them about
The salary.
salary because you're making yourself more valuable.
Well, I was going to say the funny thing is that for the individual could be more valuable in the long run. And I think employers, because it's not as much upfront, salary is a hard number. Employers get very fixated on a number. Training's a little more, could mean arbitrary in terms of the cost. And so you might have a better chance getting more benefit out of negotiating
Right.
that.
Because most employees are I don't want to call them lazy, but they have a short-term view. It's like, well, I'm putting in my time, just pay me my money. I'm not going to do this extra stuff on nights and weekends.
Yeah.
Whereas you're willing to do that, you're gonna make yourself more valuable to the employer. Already they're thinking, hey, this person's somebody I want to keep around. And once they spend that money training you, they are going to want to keep you around.
Right. Yeah. Now they're invested. Um, Frank, let's just wrap this segment up, kind of going the other way, right? So you mentioned a story about somebody clearly was very willing to negotiate, but I know for a lot of young adults that can be an uncomfortable conversation. You know, they may not know as much or feel as confident negotiating. Any advice for somebody who feels uncomfortable trying to negotiate a job offer?
Well, like I said, it's you don't have a lot of wiggle room unless you've got really special skills that they
Right.
really need.
Right.
You know, you've got your bachelor's degree, you've worked part-time for a few years. So, you know, you can always go back and ask for a little more. They usually have a range that they know. They're not gonna bring you in at the top of the range. Um, so yeah, like I said, just say, well, I was thinking that this job should pay this much. You don't have to be hardcore about it.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth. But some employers might actually they don't resent it. And if you come back and say, well, they're offering you 60,000, you come back and say, well, I need 70.
Yeah.
Well, then you better know why
Yeah.
that job's worth 70, or because they're just going to say no.
Yeah. No, I think, again, I don't think it's as I don't employers don't feel as they're not going to be angry usually about it or whatnot. As long as you're kind of reasonable and have your reasons why, and then go into it thinking if you believe that what you're asking is reasonable, the worst they could say is no.
Right.
um, that probably gets you a lot of the way there.
Well, and part of it is if you ask for a little money and you ask for them to pay for training,
Mhm.
and it might be a good idea to have the training in mind that you're thinking about.
Right.
At least then they have the ability to say yes to something. Odds are
Right.
odds are it'll be the training,
Hmm.
and they won't not no to the salary, but you'll get something. It's a smart way to negotiate. You don't. It's not an all or nothing.
Right. Yeah, people don't like to say no twice. Put the ball in their court. Well, Frank, this has been a great discussion. I want to wrap it up with actually a student sit down that I'm really interested in because I mentioned earlier, something you have a lot of experience with being a contractor. And this is somebody asking about their well paying side hustle versus pursuing a full time 9 to 5 job. So here goes. The question is they're 22 years old and just graduated college with a finance degree. They were offered a full-time job with benefits, all the standard deal that'll pay them around 75 to 80K per year and a clear path to moving up over the next 10 years. They mentioned that about a year ago, they started a social media marketing side hustle that's currently bringing them about 4K per month and takes up 5 to 15 hours a week. So their question is, should they consider taking this side hustle that is starting to turn into some real money into a full-time job, or should they go for the more secure, uh, stable job offer that they've received?
Well, the first thing I should say is congratulations. You can now save $4,000 a month and put that away in your savings account and really be happy when you go to retire. Um, this is a tough one. You know what? It's hard to give an answer on the side hustle because side hustles a lot of times are deals that work in the moment. They work for a year, they work for a couple years. I've talked to so many people that have had really successful little businesses on the internet, but as the internet evolves, the business goes away. What they're doing goes away. The ability to buy the product they're buying and resell it goes away. And so that would be my first question: is it how sure are you that this is going to happen? Continue to go. You know, The second piece of advice is, okay, it's taking 5 to 15 hours a week. It's not a lot of time,
Right.
you know? I yeah, I would take the full-time job with the benefits, get the health insurance going, because 4,000 is not a lot when you get now you gotta pay health insurance, you gotta have 401k, you gotta try to save. There's a lot more benefits to having the job. Continue doing the side job, and if you can make it grow, bring in a part-time employee to work for you and do it.
Well, I was going to say this gets into the whole, they see, oh, I'm working 15 hours a week, bringing in this much. If I work 40 hours a week, and they just multiply, and it doesn't always work out that way.
No,
Um, so I'm, that's the chance you have to take. But I'm with you. If you can continue to bring in 4K a month for 5 to 15 hours of work a week, and you're working 40 hours at this other place, that's only 55 hours a week. Sounds like a lot to a lot of people, but if you really do the math, it's not that many hours in a day. Um, and
it's not. Cut out watching YouTube and you'll pick up 15 hours a week right
stop.
there.
There you go. Stop learning how to dance on TikTok. Well, Frank, I appreciate you coming on again to help us learn a little more about taxes, side hustles, negotiating job offers. I think these are all very important things, of course, for young adults out there. And for those listening, definitely stay tuned next time. We've been talking a lot about the tools and strategies and things of that nature. But next time, we're going to get into really the most important thing, in my opinion, mindsets, lifestyle choices. I mean, these are the things that really are going to enable you to start living a better financial future. So definitely want to tune in for that one. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Colin, always good to be here.
And we'll see everyone next time on another edition of the McEnulty Method.